In most any good hi-fi audio setup, there's always seems to be some component that is like an unsung hero, kind of an underdog in this system. It might be no frills, might not be glamorous, might not be something that you show off or really talk about, but it just quietly does its job really well for you, and you wouldn't be without it. I'm somebody who tends to kind of root for the underdog anyway, and so I couldn't resist shooting a little video here to give some airtime to those things in my system that just quietly do their jobs really well year after year, even though they're not necessarily all that interesting. Now, this is a piece of equipment that I'm a little bit nervous to show you actually because maybe it's a little bit controversial. There is a certain contingency of people out there who are angry that such a thing exists and they refuse to acknowledge that it can make a difference. But well, here we go anyway, and stick around, I'll give you a bonus. If you don't like this, there's something else that I can show you. But this, or should I say these, are a pair of AudioQuest Viper unbalanced RCA interconnects. These are decades old. It's one of the first things I ever bought when I was putting my first good system together, and I bought these to go between my first tube preamp and power amp. And they weren't really expensive by high-end standards. I think they were a couple of $100. I know for some people they refuse to accept that cables would cost that much, but in terms of high-end audiophile cables, that's really not that much. And these were not super high in AudioQuest's line. These come from the old school lineup of several decades ago. And what can I say? They're no frills, they're well made, they're nothing super duper fancy, but these cables, I've just loved them every time I've used them. They are super duper neutral cables. They really don't impart their own character on anything. They're not really filtering the signal. They're not holding back resolution. Really what I'm saying is they don't ever seem to act as a bottleneck in my system, and that is all I really want out of cables. I just want them to disappear in the system. I do not like using cables as tone controls, especially if you're spending good money on good cables. In my view, they just ought to disappear and not do anything to change the sonic character of your system. I would rather use other components to try and balance tonality of a system. So these cables, I'll tell you what, I've shot them out against all kinds of other cables over the years, from the cheap blister pack garbage cables you get at big box stores all the way up to multiple $1,000 cables. And I'll tell you, these hold their own. And they're really kind of a forgotten, long out of production model in AudioQuest's lineup. And I've just really have never been dissatisfied with these. These have never let me down. And although I've used them in different parts of my system over the years as I've gotten different cables, they've been between amplifiers, they've been between sources and amplifiers. Anywhere I've ever used them, they've given me exactly what I want. They're one of those few cables out there that just seem to always really make a noticeable difference anywhere I use them when compared to lesser cables. And as I say, hold their own against more expensive cables for sure. I love these things, and I never talk about them or really acknowledge them. They just quietly sit there in the back of my equipment rack doing their job really, really well. My ancient old AudioQuest Vipers, unsung hero. I love them. Now, if you are somebody who hates the idea of anything more than just cheap sort of lamp cord grade cables, before you take to the comments section pounding your keyboard angrily going, "You're hearing things, cables can't make a difference, I'm very angry about this," as sometimes can happen in discussions about audio cables in my experience, let me throw you a little bonus, something else that's maybe not so controversial. Another underdog component in my system is this guy. This is a vinyl periphery clamp. Now, I'm sure you're all very familiar with record weights and record clamps that go over the spindle of your turntable, the idea being to flatten out the center of a vinyl to take care of any dishing if your vinyl is a little bit warped and wants to sit on your platter like this, dished in the middle. You know, that record weight goes over the spindle and kind of flattens it out like this. But when you flip that same vinyl over, that weight or that clamp won't be helping you anymore because now it's sticking up off the platter on the edges. That's where a periphery clamp like this comes in. And I will never quite understand why these are not standard issue on all high-end turntables, just as clamps and weights pretty much are really common now. You don't see very many high-end turntables without them, either as an accessory or included. And as far as I'm concerned, those are only half the equation. This is the other half of the equation for flattening out a warped vinyl on your turntable. And unless the turntable manufacturer is doing something novel, like, for example, soda turntables, some of them have like a vacuum platter system, the idea being that the platter would sort of suck the vinyl down to the platter. Actually kind of a cool system. It's prone to its own issues, but pretty cool system. Your other option is really going to be a mechanical option like this, just a big heavy ring that goes around the outside of your platter and helps pull that vinyl down nice and flat to the platter. You don't see these a lot. I know VPI makes them, and VPI charges an insane amount of money for their periphery clamps. I'm not trying to throw shade at VPI. I'm a fan of VPI equipment. I've got a VPI record cleaner sitting right behind me. They make excellent stuff. Just because they can charge that for a clamp doesn't mean they should. That's my humble opinion. VPI, if you're out there listening, don't charge so much for those clamps. Try and get them in more hands because these things are great for dealing with vinyl imperfections in terms of how they sit on the platter. Over the years, I've seen a couple of other smaller makers try to make these things, and I realize there are some boring practicality concerns about these periphery rings, namely they're not one size fits all. Different platters have different diameters on different turntables, and indeed this ring actually is an AR ring that goes with my Frankenstein B turntable. I've had it on a couple of my other videos. It's an AR XB and Merrill Frankenstein mashup turntable. It's just made out of spare parts from both of those brands of turntables, and this actually works with my Merrill acrylic platter on that turntable. This same ring does not actually work with my A turntable, which is a Michel Gyro SE. It just doesn't fit on that platter, and that is a bummer. It also means that I have some warped vinyls in my collection that will only work on my B turntable, and it's because of this. It's because of this ring. Again, these things should be way more ubiquitous than they really are, and it's just such a hero in my setup. So, these are my picks, the old periphery ring and my trusty, loyal old AudioQuest Viper interconnects, my underdog components in my system. I'd like to hear from you. What is the underdog component or the unsung hero, the unglamorous but really important thing in your setup that you wouldn't be without? Drop me a comment. I would love to hear from you about that. And if you enjoyed this content, throw me a like and consider subscribing. That's really helpful for small potato channels like mine. I really appreciate that. I thank each and every one of you who took the time to watch this video, and I will see you in the next one.